We did it.
Yes.
Just in time, too.
We've made it. It's now
Who's just in time? Is he joining us too?
No,
oh, my goodness.
He didn't know any
They
good
have
songs.
started.
Yeah, he didn't know any good songs.
He's Morris Day's younger brother.
Ah, I see what you did there.
Dad jokes, ladies and gentlemen. This episode is all about dad jokes. It is. It's about dad jokes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I guess it's time to start the show.
Yeah.
You want to start the show?
Are we live?
Hey, Gabe, why are you back? Where did Rich go?
He's having fun right now for no good reason. And look,
We're
all right,
not.
not for nothing. We got to give Evan credit because he came up with the best dad joke so far.
Which
It's right in
one?
the chat.
Okay, I didn't see
I
it.
missed it. Yeah, I missed it.
Oh, it's right there. It says, dad jokes are how I roll. EYEROLL.
good.
Oh.
So
Wow.
good. Hi, nerds.
Hi, nerds. How you doing? Welcome. Hey, we have Gabe back on the show, but the weird part is, Gabe, where are you right now?
I'm where? I'm at this guy's desk.
You're at my desk.
I'm at Jay's desk. I'm in San Diego for some work, and I stopped by. I heard there was a show. And I stopped by.
Nice.
Okay, so interestingly, John, I'm glad you said that because that is one of the reasons we're back. We're going to do a little debrief on the last episode that we had about ES2. Andy Lund couldn't make it. He's traveling. Lindsay couldn't make it. She's traveling. And I'm traveling tomorrow at 6 a.m. So
I'm traveling too, but I traveled here.
You traveled here, and
I
Rich is
traveled
always
all the way-
traveling.
All the way upstairs to be on this deboxer episode. Oh, debrief. Debrief, not deboxer.
Deboxer? Debrief? What?
Boxer brief.
What?
Yeah.
Jay is in
a
bar.
fern bar.
I am in a fern bar. I am between two ferns, actually. They're not ferns. This is a cactus.
Someone says there's echoes and repeating, and they can't understand us.
Echoes.
Hit
and
us up in the
repeating.
comments if everyone is getting that and not just one person.
Might be a headphones issue.
I'm not hearing it.
Hey, Rich, in your audio settings, did you hit echo canceling?
Is there such a thing?
Yeah, there's a little thing at the
Actually,
bottom
you can
says
do it for 'em.
settings. Can I?
Yeah.
I
How?
can.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah, my
Yeah, his-
echo cancellation is
He's good.
checked.
Mark
Okay.
Winslow says his audio is fine. So
All clear in San Diego. I mean,
All clear.
Downers Grove.
well, that's
Oh,
our whole audience right there.
Okay. Yeah. All we
It's
need
our
is
target
All right.
audience.
right?
Yeah, we're fine. Paul says it's fine. We're fine.
well, if it's not, if it bums you out, we're sorry. We'll try and fix it. This
Maybe
is a low budget.
Refresh the page.
This is a low budget talk show.
I mean, I'm not
And
getting paid.
Well, you are getting paid, but you're getting paid for being an employee of Taylor Guitars. You know how I know you're an employee of Taylor Guitars? If I move, well, there's that. But if I
Did
also
you
move
steal that
this,
from your
around-
desk and take it home?
oh, he's also a
They
thief.
sent it to me
Oh, they sent
when
it
they
to
took
you.
my desk away.
They sent it to you?
Yes.
That's pretty awesome.
I'm trying to wear it as a name badge, a badge. Anyway,
A badge of honor. Okay, so welcome everybody. Thanks for joining us in the feed. We got a lot of folks coming in for this. Is a good episode. It's kind of a follow up from last. We skipped last week. We got super busy, and in a minute I'm going to show you why we skipped last week. I have a little short, like 30-second clip of why we skipped last week. But I do want you to know before we get going, we do have Rich Casciato on the show, and it's so good to see you, man. It's been like a whole pandemic.
I know.
You were on the show twice before or once?
Just once. Yeah, I think
Okay.
just once.
Huh. My mom
Yeah.
said that was the nerdiest show we ever made. And then
Yeah.
last week she was like, oh man, the ES2 episode, and then she called me, which was great. So my mom gave me a debrief after the episode. She called me and she said, I had zero idea what you guys were talking about the entire time.
Well, we'll try to make it easy. Well,
Yeah, she said, what is
this
an
Pete
E2?
make
Is it like, I think she said something like R2D2? Like, you know, and I should have clarified. We forget that some people don't know what we're talking about. So, Mom, I'm publicly apologizing. It was a nerdy show last week, 2 weeks ago. So we brought Gabe back so that we can totally debrief for just a short minute on last week's episode, or I keep saying last week, last episode 84, the ES2 episode. But we thought that it would be such a great idea to have Rich come on, because the first episode you did, Rich, was signal chain. And we talked about the signal chain of your acoustic guitar. And
we're still going to probably get
What?
there. And we're probably going to get there again just a little bit. Because
yeah,
we're
we're going to go
the
signal
DI.
chain for sure.
Yeah.
So before we super nerd out, right, will a video of this episode be available later? Where and how? Right here, John. So once this goes live, the link is always the same. Once we are no longer live, it lasts forever. Jade, does your mom play guitar? No, she's retired from her church choir, and she was a pianist as I was growing up. She did make me play a hand-me-down clarinet at first, though, and I was pretty bummed back in the day about the clarinet. I'm not going to lie.
I'd be bummed about playing a new clarinet.
I'd be bummed about playing a new clarinet. It was a hand-me-down clarinet. It was wild.
I'm kidding to the clarinetists out there.
Maybe she's
Yeah.
trying to teach you how to read.
Well, that never happened, Rich.
REED, Jay.
Oh, man.
I know. Oh,
So
my
is it
goodness.
time for Evan's question?
Yeah, the show's over, ladies and gentlemen. All right, so
2 minutes. Sports.
okay, so if you're new to the show, this is a live podcast or live talk show, but it's a guitar nerd talk show. So I like to give a little disclaimer up front. Let's keep the feed clean. Let's not get aggro at people or angry or post some, hateful or derogatory stuff, or we're going to kick you out. Okay. Let's keep the nerd and guitar nerd and get really happy about this. Rich, welcome back to the show. Gabe, thanks for jumping on. This was Rich's idea, actually, to have you jump on. It was not my idea. I didn't want it to happen.
I wanted Gabe here.
Yeah,
I'm
because
excited
he's a
about
nerd.
it. I'm a nerd.
Yeah.
And
Well,
I-
because he's just between the two of us. I mean, like if I say something, then Gabe can put it into easier speak, probably.
I'm a simpleton, is what Rich just said. No, I'm really fortunate. I've known Rich for a long time. Interestingly, Rich and Mike were both district sales managers back when I was a Taylor dealer and tech. So these are two guys I've known for a long time, and Rich and I have always had a lot of fun just talking about guitar nerd stuff. About signal chains and about amps and playing live. And there's Daria Musk, somebody who knows a lot about this topic, and Rich Ram. So it's really great to be on it and be able to kind of continue those chats with an audience.
Yeah, it's awesome. But before we
next-
continue, we have to see how Mike Venezia is doing. Mike, how are you? And Roger?
I mean, I'm okay. Roger is eating Porky Pig right now, so he's in his glory. He's very happy.
I'm sure.
Porky is having a less excellent time.
I think Rich just self-edited just a little bit, and know he's got a dad joke of some sort about.
Of course, he
Dogs.
probably does.
No,
No.
I actually was going to jump on there, Mike. As Mike knows, I have a cat, Jack.
Yes, and everybody
And
knows that
Jack-
Rich has a cat because whenever we have meetings, his cat just does the whole like Godfather thing and just walks in front of the camera, and then he has to hold the cat and just be like, "Dude, get out of the way." But the cat is prominent, so
And if I don't pet that cat, it will slap me.
yeah,
All right,
he's
you guys.
kind of aggressive actually.
The door is closed. Jack is sequestered.
Jack is
Roger-
sequestered. All right.
Roger roams free, and you can see him. He's right there.
Roger's a part of the show now, so
He
he's
is.
got to be
He's
there.
a co-host.
He's a co-host.
Unofficial.
All right.
Okay, so we got that out of the way. We start the show, if you're new to the show, with a couple of segments. We're going to do that real quick, and then we're going to dive into the meat and potatoes of the show. We do have some trivia with a trivia prize at the end of the show, so stick around. We call that Evan's question. Our boy Evan sends us over some questions, and we got a good one tonight. Actually, it's not that hard, but it's a great bit of history I'm excited about. We also do another segment called Hug Your Haters. This is when we get hate in the comments section or hate in the emails. I would like to say, after the ES2 episode, we got a considerable amount of hate, and it was fantastic. I loved it. Here's why. Part of the hate was not really hate. In a roundabout way, they were saying, but I learned a lot. Right. Most of the hate was about how much talking we do at the beginning of the show. It's a live podcast where we talk for quite a while. This is kind of the whole point of the show, is to talk and to get to know you guys and hang out with you guys in the feed. So I brought these nerds who talk a lot. It's really great. One of the pieces, I'm going to point at one piece of hate and then talk about a couple of pieces of love that we got, some emails that we got. One of the pieces of hate simply said, well, I have to censor myself. It was very short, and it's got short and to the point, and they put a lot of thought behind this critique, and it was, what? Are you guys smoking something? F you. And that was it. And I'm thinking to myself, why are you so angry? Well, then he watched the show. That was based on just the email. Then he watched the show, and I got an email that said, actually, I learned a lot. Thanks. So when there is hate around, there's always some love on the other side of that. The thing that I noticed, and we'll get into what are you listening to, but the thing that I noticed, instead of hate, we did surely get a lot of, wow, Gabe's method really worked. I really learned how to do some stuff. So once we unpack that episode in a little bit, we'll dive more into that. But overall, it was one of our most successful shows that we've ever had. As far as view time, people watched about 89% of it, which is very long time for a 2-hour show. You could do the math if you'd like. And it's got close to 8,000 views, I think, by now. So thanks for watching. We appreciate that. Hopefully this show will also be pretty informational for you. All right, let's go into a segment. Segment number 1. Should we do a segment clip? Yes.
Can I follow up to what you're saying a second?
No. Yeah, go ahead.
Don, in the questions, Don, it's a guitar nerd talk show. It's a talk show. We're getting to the DIs. We're getting in there. Of the things that maybe were hate or negative comments that I've seen about the last episode, the ones that I think lean a little bit negative, I feel like are folks who kind of said, well, I was waiting for somebody to tell me how to use the ES2. Like they wanted like a dialed in guide, like a preset that you should use that works for all guitars. And what we're trying to get across, and hopefully got across to most people, is that there isn't, because it's so reflective of the guitar and the player, there isn't one thing to use for everything, because it sounds different depending on what you put it in and who's playing it. And that was the point. We're trying to get you to the point where you can use it. So yeah, that hopefully that helps clear that up.
Yeah, that's true. It is. It did clear a lot up, and we'll get into that. But right now we're going to do a quick segment, and you know what time it is. It is time for that segment. What are you listening to?
I have to make a new version of that useless clip. It's so
I know
bad.
it's terrible, right? It's not terrible. It's just it's old. Okay, Rich, what have you been listening to lately, my friend?
I'm getting back into a lot of stuff that I forgot about, like some old Robin Ford, and like the Inside Story LP, the Truth CD, and just reacquainting myself with just how good and soulful of a player Robin is. And I was joking around with this album cover here, this old Captain Beyond. And for those of you that don't know who they are, shame on you. No, it's like the old Deep Purple and Iron Butterfly, and with Bobby Caldwell playing drums. And I always listen to a lot of Phil Kagi because he's just like probably one of the better fingerstyle players out there.
Yeah, it's awesome. You're also a nerd. And
You say that in the nicest way.
I do. I do. I thoroughly enjoy the fact of you do have an interesting wealth of knowledge with music, but a lot of it is based on, like, you have so many guitar heroes and so many interesting guitar players, and when you tell me what you're listening to, you're kind of like Andy Powers, right? When you tell me what you're listening to, I always go, and I go listen to it, and you're right. Every time it's fantastic. I love having you on the show, man. Gabriel, what have you been listening to? The mute button.
Yeah, sorry,
Gabriel's
I'm
been
unmuting.
listening to American Sign Language.
So I spend a lot of my time like carting kids to and from places, and while listening to a lot of kids music, I also try to introduce my kids to other things. And so I'll play like Brandy Carlisle or things like that, and try to kind of introduce my young kids to other music. Lately I've gotten a lot of requests from my youngest daughter, who's about to turn 4, Scarlett. She really likes Blue Skies by Lyle Lovett, so we've been listening to that a lot. There's a few different tracks. Right. I love Lyle Lovett. A huge fan. There's Josh Ritter has a new record coming out, and so I know I'm going to have that in heavy rotation, so I've been playing some Josh Ritter kind of deep cuts, and there's a few of those that she's really taken a liking to. So a lot of that stuff lately. Also I've been on the total opposite end of musical spectrum. I've been listening to Seosin because because they're going, back on tour and stuff. And I'm like, oh, I need to
come back. We're almost there.
Back into rotation.
Yeah, it's a talk show. So a lot of people don't understand that this is long form, but we'll get there. Seosin, interesting. There's a record right to your right that I helped in a weird way make. And that record is 20 years old. It's a EP. It was their first EP, and I in a weird way paid for it. I should get something for that. I got the record. Oh, it's not balancing? That happens. Mike, what have you been listening to?
Oh, you know how it goes with me. I always give 2 answers, the right one and the wrong one. No, not well. I mean, always, but but yeah, I totally caved yesterday to the peer pressure of Kiss's final tour.
Oh, wow.
And I bought 2 tickets to see them at the Hollywood Bowl, which I now have to find a second job to pay for these. But, and still, even with that, not as bad as a friend of mine who paid $1,800 for 1 ticket for the final show at Madison Square Garden, and he doesn't even get to meet the band. So anyway, been listening to a lot of Kiss because, well, you got to bone up on it before the show, and the show's in November, so there's not enough time for me to listen to everything between now and November. Oh, wait, there is. And then also, I've been completely nerding out. Those of you that know, watch the show, I'm a vinyl junkie. I picked this up the other day.
Oh, cool.
Oh, that's
cool. This is amazing. I don't care if you like Steely Dan, don't like Steely Dan, doesn't matter. This thing sounds so clean, so good. It's like you're in the control room listening to the 2-track master. It's that good. So UHQR is putting out the first 8 Steely Dan albums in this format, and it costs way too much. But they are cool, and I'm listening to it and getting my money's worth out of it.
Hey, Jay. Mike, did you have another one as well, or was that it?
That was it. Kiss and Steely Dan.
Rich has another one.
Well, here's an interesting one. I haven't listened to this in about 30, maybe 40 years, but I'm going to hold up the back cover of this LP. And there's a guy right
There's a mustache that we know.
there.
Look at that mustache, man.
Wow.
Does it come out?
Now,
I think
You
he's come
lost
out.
it. Yeah.
there we go. There we go. Now there's that.
Who could
looks
that
like-
guy be?
I think it's John Oates.
I
from
think it's
Hall &
me.
Oates.
My first album that I made when I was 20 years old.
Your
Look
name's
at
not
you.
Floyd Cutler.
I am no, that is not me.
All right.
Anyway, that guy was me.
I'll move it on. I'll move it
Steve
along.
in the comments, we do know it's 9:20 on the East Coast. I'm from Ohio, so it's usually 9:20 when I'm on or producing the show. We get it.
So
Yeah,
let's
it's
get
called
into
prime
Let's
time.
do
That's
it.
why we called
Let's
it prime
do
time,
it.
actually, because it's
Let's do
prime time. Anyway, all good here. I've been listening. We lost a couple of monsters recently, musical monsters. In fact, over the weekend, we lost David Lindley, California boy. David Lindley was probably the only person I've ever seen play a lute live in my life. I don't know if I knew what the instrument was at the time. I've seen him play oud a lot. I've seen him rip on banjo, but he was a big inspiration to our good friend Ben Harper, who's been on the show, California boy, and I've been digging into some David Lindley for the last couple of days, and then we lost Michael Rode, bass player, and he was in Nashville. He's a really, really good friend of our director of artist relations, Tim Godwin, and I had an opportunity to meet him and film him. Gabe and I actually might have filmed him. Maybe you were there when we filmed Michael Rode at Zach Brown's studio at Southern Ground, and he is music's equivalent, a bass equivalent to like Josh Freese, if you're familiar with Josh Freese. He is on thousands of records. He was a session bass player, and he was just absolutely incredible. So I started digging into records that they have been on and were on. And I have been listening to a Taylor player, a newer Taylor player. Her name is Lizzie McAlpine. And that is the reason why I was not here. That's why the reason we did not do a show last week is I actually got an interesting phone call on last Monday, and it was Lizzie is taping Jimmy Fallon this week on Thursday. Can we get guitars tomorrow? And at that point, I said, heck yeah, we're not doing a primetime episode. And I'm going to show you a clip of Lizzie's performance on Fallon. And I can't show the whole thing, so you understand that, but I will link it later so that you can see the performance. But what I really want to dive into is because we're going to segue this right into the topic of tonight, and that is DI and a little bit of ES2. Okay. So she was plugged in to a regular old radial DI. Okay. That's it. That's all she had. And then this is going through an ES2. So check this out real quick, just about a 43-second clip, and then we'll talk about it.
Ceiling plaster, can't you just make it move faster? Lovely to be sitting here with you. You're kinda cute, but it's raining.
All right.
Wow.
ES2. That was an ES2 on a AD27E through a radial DI. That sounded exactly like she wanted it to sound. It sounded much like the record, which was recorded on a mahogany top guitar. I believe it was a Taylor. A guy who recorded that particular song is a Taylor guy. And that right there sounds exactly like Lizzie wanted it to sound and exactly how she plays. She plays with the side of her thumb. She does not play with the pick. She does not play with the meaty part of her thumb. She almost catches her nail on the strings when she plays. And that was an exact replication of what they wanted to hear. So much so that her music team, all of her music directors, or her 2 music directors and the audio people at Fallon came back and actually said, in a weird way, in a funny conversation, that almost sounded better than the record, which was interesting. But Gabe, Rich, Mike, I'd love to hear your opinions on what you just heard in that short little clip with Lizzie. Want to take it, Gabe?
Sure. I think you really get an idea, and the first thing that kind of impressed me about that when I heard it is you get the sense of kind of like the fingernail from her index finger and from the thumb, like if you've ever sat there and played that way, you know what that texture is like. And normally with like an undersaddle pickup, you wouldn't get the kind of texture of the surface of what she's using the way you would like miking a guitar or using the ES2. You would hear an undersaddle pickup the same way it would sound with a pick, or if you used a lanyard on it. It doesn't. So I think the fact that you can actually get the texture of and the nuance of how she's playing and how she's touching the strings, and also kind of the delicacy of how she's playing, right? Because she's using very light touch.
Very light.
You're getting this really delicate thing out of it. Man, I mean, that's what I love about it.
Rich,
Yeah.
what did you think?
Well, here is the AD. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the guitar, right? And you have, and this is the perfect example of, Mike, remember when we would do road shows and we would say, what are the elements? And the tactile touch of the player is so important.
Yeah.
And how it responds to that mahogany top, and how all of that translates to the pickup. Because as Gabe talked about 2 weeks ago, and as we've been preaching about ES2 for eons, is that the pickup is and Paul Tobias even reminded me of this the other day, that ES2 pickup is almost like a microphone, where and it translates what the top of the guitar is speaking, and where an undersaddle pickup is more of a condenser, or that's the wrong word. It's nuts. The word escaped me, but a sensor, I guess, maybe.
Sensor, yeah.
So I think that 40 some seconds eclipsed what we could talk about this whole time.
Right.
The player's touch, the right pickup. I was trying to see if I could see where the knobs on the guitar.
I can tell you exactly where they are because I dialed them in for you. So let me
Okay.
grab a guitar real quick. Hold on.
That would be interesting to see, because it translated amazing.
All right, you see that?
Yep.
So you got
So
bass.
they were basically flat.
Nope. You got bass right here.
Yep.
Roll it off just a notch.
Oh,
Roll it
right.
off. Roll treble just off just a notch, and then take your volume. And it was actually a little higher than 9 o'clock.
okay. So there you go. Well, that was a good episode right there. Yeah, a direct box and a great touch. Thank you, folks. Good night.
That's so awesome. But this is what we were talking about. A lot of it is one of the things we said last episode. Gabe said it. Mike said it. Mike has this quote last episode that was so awesome, where he said, "You can't just take a Les Paul and plug it in and it's going to sound perfect." And so I think that, doubling back on what Gabe was saying earlier, is there's no magic bullet. There's no one and done. There's no, I've heard arguments of people, Pro Tools versus analog versus Logic, Pro Tools versus Logic. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, Pro Tools and Logic are digital audio workstations. They're digital recording consoles at the end of the day. We've heard these terms, also known as a DAW mom or a DAW. Had to clarify that. I don't want to get yelled at after the show again. That was rough. Anyway, but I've heard these arguments between people going, this is just too hard. I can't just plug it in. I can't just plug it in and it doesn't just record this. You've heard people say some things like, this guitar is not going to record itself, right? Well, I think that a lot of people want that. They want to be able to go boom. I saw a comment earlier about Cubase is rad, Mark. I love MIDI, so I'm a big fan of Cubase. But I saw a comment earlier. When you talk about DIs, will you also talk about IRs? We'll get there. But right now, let's just talk about that signal chain. So going back to that signal chain, you guys talk about it in road shows. An important one we've established is the important one is you, right? How are you in this instrument? Will you walk?
And that's the hardest discussion. I didn't mean to interrupt, Jay, but that's the hardest discussion. The hardest discussion to have at a road show, or when you're in a store and someone may be saying, well, I'm not happy with this or not happy with that. First thing I always do is, let me see you play.
Yeah.
Let me watch you play. And then you have to somehow, in love, look at the person and go, it's not the guitar. It's the way you're playing the guitar. And that's where the hate comes in. And that's where, and because it's personal. You just attacked, it's like you attacked them personally, but you're not. You're trying to help them. Remember in what was the Tom Cruise movie where he was a race car driver?
Days of Thunder.
Days of Thunder.
You
Cole
remember
Trickle.
when Cole Trickle. So when Cole Trickle took the thing around and he said, here's the tires. What did I say, Mike?
Rubbin is racing.
You didn't say anything, but between these two guys, they're nerding out on Days of Thunder now.
Yeah.
Ron Howard directed it. Hey, I'm in.
Right. All right. So he pointed to the tires and he said, "This is what the tires look like when you race your way, but here's what the tires look like when you race my way." And you're trying to get this across to someone, and it's the hardest thing ever.
I think one of the things that we talk about a lot when we're talking about the ES2 is the fact that it's so reflective of the guitar and of the player. And choosing, this is something obviously that Rich, you and Mike, doing like road shows and Find Your Fit events and talking to dealers, training dealers, is how to help somebody find the right instrument from them. I've gotten to work with a lot of artists and stuff over the years, and I won't always I won't always name names on what we're talking about, but there's an artist that Jay and I worked with a few years ago that was playing a really beautiful all Koa guitar with like an extremely thin pick, who is a really hard strummer. And what is that guitar? What does that end up sounding like? Yeah, it's like a.
And by thin pick, it was like a piece of paper.
Nails on a chalkboard.
Right, and so you end up with a really, really thin sound, right? And just by nature, you end up with this really stringy, abrasive sound. There's no tone to it. It's just really stringy. Yeah. Whether you mic it, whether you plug it in, whatever. So she probably should have had a spruce top guitar, or something else.
But a lot of
was a she.
I do. It was
or he.
She.
That artist.
It was really interesting. Is a lot of us, even myself, we'll buy guitars and we'll look at guitars and we'll pick up guitars based on how they look,
right? And
not necessarily or what the price is, right? Like we come in and they look and they go, wow, I don't have that much budget. And our guys, I know, train really well on this. I know when people come in and they say, at a road show or at a Find Your Fit event, they'll come in and say, this is my budget. And I know Zach Arntz, who's been on the show, has a technique where he then goes and grabs the guitar I just picked up, which was an 814 CE, and puts it in their hand. And they see the price tag on it and they say, oh boy, I can't afford this. I didn't say this. That's not my budget. I didn't say, $3,000-$4,000. I said $1,000. And Zach will say, I know. But I want you to know what a $3,000 or $4,000 guitar feels like and what it sounds like in your hands. so that you can understand these things going back to that budget, right? It's really, really, really interesting. But a lot of the times it's the guitar we pick. It might not be right for what we're trying to play. Or I said it last episode, Rich. I knew you were in the feed, but I'd love to hear your thoughts about this. When I play some of these guitars that Andy Powers has designed, they sound terrible. But when Andy plays, or when, you play, or when, a musician, or when Lizzie plays thin like that, like they make it sound better.
Look, we can have a guitar on the wall, and we have 10 guitar players in the room, and you record them, it's going to sound like 10 different guitars. I mean, if we don't all agree
100%.
to that, then we need to go further back in time and figure out a place where we can agree on something, because that's 100% fact.
Yeah, 100%. And that happens with electric guitars too, right?
Well, and Jay, and I'm really glad you said that, Gabe, because, you take an electric guitar, and let's say we take a Fender Telecaster.
Yeah.
Okay. One of the hardest guitars really to play to sound good, but once you master it, okay, and you plug it into a Fender Deluxe Reverb amp, which is a 25-watt single 12 amp that is like the pièce de résistance of amplifiers. And you set the tone controls on 7, which is where Leo Fender designed that amp to perform flawlessly, right? Volume on 7, bass on 7, treble on 7. Okay. That was his magic formula. And you hand it to different people, it sounds totally different. So yeah, it is that somebody in the feed said, "Hey guys, come on, the best sounding guitar is the one that you like the best." Well, I think that's what it said. It blazed by me really quick. And sure, because if you pick up something that you like, you're going to be inspired to play it maybe a little bit better, or find something about that guitar. But I think that what we really want to dial into, Jay, because we're already 35 minutes into this thing, is,
and we're going to get yelled at if we don't.
Yeah, is how can we? What's the best we can do to sound as good as we can sound? Okay. So we've talked ES2.
Yeah.
And till we're blue in the face, and some people are still going to hate it, and some people are still going to love it, no matter what we do. But it was really nice to hear that you got that letter that said that, hey, the guy listened to it and I learned something. So. And now, Jay, the direct box that you just had in your hand was what was it?
Just a radio, basic
just
radio,
a radio.
passive
Okay.
DI.
Radio
Hey,
Pro DI.
real quick, before we do that, can I show that image that I showed you guys earlier, just so that people understand really what we're talking about?
Yeah.
So this is just a schematic that I borrowed from the internet somewhere. I just searched up schematic and it showed up, so I borrowed it. So I appreciate whoever made it, but this is what we're talking about. Okay. The direct box, direct injection box. And we will get into what it actually is and does in a minute. But so when we're talking about signal chain, we're talking about your guitar going in the input of the direct box, right? And going into the PA. And in this case, coming out through an amp. So I'll go back to you. Maybe before we start diving in, Rich, Gabe, do you want to take a minute to just, what is a DI? What is a direct injection box? What does it do? We talked about it a little bit last episode, and then I'd love to have Rich get into actual DIs.
Sure. The simple definition is a DI takes the high impedance signal from the output of your guitar jack, and it converts that into a balanced, which is on the ES2 is an unbalanced signal, and it converts it into a balanced low impedance signal, or the same thing as what Rich is holding up, an XLR microphone jack. If you have an ES1 equipped guitar, the ES1 has a balanced output. You don't need a DI with it. It's already balanced. And that's why it uses a tip ring sleeve connector and then goes into an XLR on the other end. So it's converting to low impedance, and then a balanced signal has a ground. So it's three points of contact, whether it be TRS or it be XLR, and that ground is where audio noise goes to resolve. So you'll have cleaner, quieter signals for longer runs of cable. So anything over like 10 feet if you're running to a PA, like if you're at home and or you're plugging into a guitar amp, that's fine. But if you're running to any kind of PA and you're any kind of distance that's like over 10 feet, I always like to use a DI because it will sound much cleaner.
So let's
can I just throw in one really quick thing as a point of clarification? Just
Really
for those
quick,
people
you
that
should take a
don't know,
very long time.
I'll take a very long time.
Okay, go.
Okay, thanks. See, even Siri's like, all right, whatever. I just want to mention this is a tip ring sleeve cable or a tip ring sleeve end. We call it stereo a lot of the time, but you could tell because it's got these two bands on it, whereas a standard guitar cable only has the one band. So you have tip, ring, and sleeve. Those are the 3 points right there. So just saying.
All right. Okay, so Gabe said something.
Dad jokes.
That was great.
That was a good one. Sam, we appreciate you.
Yeah. Let's take what Gabe said here a little bit further now, because he was talking about the lengths of the cable. So let's say you play in a church setting, or you play in a coffee shop, or you play on a larger stage. If your guitar cable, if you're going to plug directly into a PA system, even if that is a small PA, it's self-enclosed with power and everything. But if your guitar cable is longer than 10 feet, you're going to lose signal. Period. That's proven. Okay. So by using the direct box, that enables you to run. You could run 50 feet. You could run 150 feet. You can run all the way. The snake goes all the way back to the room, and your signal is still going to be very, very good. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important. Okay.
Yep.
So just like your diagram said, this is just a very simple passive, I'll get to that in a minute, direct box. So you would just plug your guitar into that. There's a ground lift on this one. And then there's your mic cable. These things are $29, $39. It's not a big deal, but this will save your bacon, on any of those things. Now you can get the passive means that it's not powered. Okay. You can also get what's called an active one. Okay. So BBE has active. So what does that mean? Well, Gabe can get into the bigger details. That's why I asked Gabe to be on, because he knows the technical thing. I just kind of blab a little bit.
I don't think you asked him.
Magnum DI is the best name for a direct box ever.
It is. And so I'll have Gabe get into it. But the idea of this is you don't have to plug it into the wall. It's phantom powered through the PA, which means that the PA has a button on it. Was it 48 volts? Is that what it is?
Yeah, 48 volts
of
power.
So 48 volts, and it runs it right through the cable, through the mic cable, and it powers this box. Okay. So it's the same deal. You plug in, then you take your cable out. So Gabe, why don't you talk about why an active could be better than a passive?
So the scenario in which I would suggest people use an active DI is if they're using a pickup that is not powered and doesn't have an internal preamp, something like a K&K, things like that. Because what an active DI does is it boosts the signal to where I'm not saying it makes it louder, it boosts the strength and quality of the signal so it's very consistent. When you have an active preamp in your guitar like you do in the ES2, like you have on most Fishman systems, Bags, all that stuff, they all have active preamps for the most part. If you have an active preamp, a passive DI works fine. You can use an active DI. It will not hurt anything if you're using an active DI. You totally can. But what an active DI does is boost the signal so it's a really consistent signal quality. So when
would you say it's like a hose, and you're putting your thumb on the hose, it just kind of gets that signal out, or is that really the wrong way of thinking about it?
It's not like it's going to give you a massive boost in volume. It's just boosting the signal strength as it gets to the PA, because when you're dealing with like passive pickups, the strength of the signal can change pretty drastically because it needs more gain pulling on it. A lot of times people with passive pickups use external preamps. So an active DI is a better choice for a passive pickup.
So for an ES2 pickup, a passive direct box is just fine.
Yep. And
So-
as far
so
as
there you go,
Rich
folks.
was talking about, so Rich held up one that was like a really basic kind of $29 one there. Jay's held up a radial DI. So, and radials are, I don't know, $100, something like that.
I think
I
so.
don't- So
Yeah.
the difference between those things is honestly about the internal components, the capacitors and things like that. The radial is going to have just higher quality components, higher quality jacks and things like that. It's going to hold up better over a lot of use. So like I use the same DIJ has, I use those a lot. And they're just built to really last. So if you're going out on, like I do a lot of artist video shoots and stuff like that. So I want a piece of gear that I can have for 10 years and it's going to get kicked around in my gear kit and be fine. So I choose that. But if you're just playing in your local coffee shop, like a basic $29 one is going to be fine. Philip just asked about, does an active DI hurt the ES2? No, an active DI is totally fine. It's not going to hurt anything.
Right.
Hey, Gabe.
And to answer Bart's question, no, you do not need to use a stereo cable with the ES2. That's the ES1, and it's a balanced output. We often call it stereo because it's the same cable like headphones would use. And what headphones do is they split the signal into one ear or the other. So a balanced output keeps the signal mono. It's just staying balanced. So ES2
Gabe,
is unbalanced.
Gabe, Rich, I know the
So
answer here.
nerdy.
I know it's so nerdy.
We're
I
so
know
nerdy.
the answer here, but I want to ask you guys so they can explain it. So you talked about 48 volts. When using a passive DI, do you need to use phantom power?
No.
Okay. When using a active DI, you need to use phantom power, and phantom
Correct.
power is the little 48 volts
Just a little button.
button.
And
Yeah,
what,
you'll see it.
for those who don't know,
Well-
what phantom power does is it sends a slight amount of current up your microphone cable to power something. Condenser microphones use phantom power. I think these microphones use phantom
Yep.
power, correct?
Yep.
And so what it does is it sends a little current up to the thing to power it.
So the next part of this equation then is trying to get the best sound, the best overall tone out of your guitar once you plug in. Now, this is where things can get dicey and where people think I may not be a nice guy, because someone will say something to the effect of, I don't like the way that pickup sounds. Well, and Jay, this is why you didn't invite me back on for quite a while, because I said something to the effect of, well, who are you and what makes you the expert
Yeah.
on what sounds good and what doesn't? You know, when was the last time you had your hearing checked, and how far can you hear?
I have a quick anecdote for that, real quick, just to add to that. Someone last week, I found out that Snoop Dogg makes children's records, and they're
Mhm.
amazing.
Right.
And I was talking to a buddy, and I said, "Where were these when our kids were that age?" And another person that I played them for said, "They're terrible and they sound stupid." And I said,
I
I
talked
said-
to my dad about this earlier. About
I said, "You don't have any kids, right?" So it's very similar. It's like our tone, sound, music. I might not like Steely Dan. Mike does. That's great. You know what I'm saying?
Well,
So back to this.
I-
Continue that, but I'm trying to break that down, that analogy for
Yeah.
people.
But I think the difference is this, that a person, and not, you know, they're not doing it on purpose, but they'll say, you don't want that. You want this because this doesn't sound good. Well, what are your qualifications? See, that's the problem that I have. And when it goes out into the masses on whether it's a podcast or whether it's a Taylor Facebook page or anything else, you're influencing people based on what your hearing level is.
Yeah.
And we don't know what that is. I mean, my right ear was 20 years of a Marshall stack, you know, and I'm going to tell you what sounds good.
Marshall stack, for those of you who don't know, he's talking about guitar amps.
A big guitar amp.
that were
All right,
designed
so-
for when there were no PAs.
Right. When they were designed for
Okay.
when there were no PAs.
All right, so now let's take this a little bit further. Let's go down the rabbit hole just a little bit.
Well,
let's go back.
Can
Let's
I
talk
add to
about a
just
microphone.
can I add to just what you were saying a little bit, Rich, right
Yeah,
there?
yeah.
Just what
One
you
of the
were
things
saying.
I tend to say, so just to kind of rephrase what you're saying when you're talking about like qualifications and things. One of the things that
Rephrase the qualifications.
what is happening to my life right now?
Where's
One
the
of the things
mute
that
button for Jay?
one of the things that I tend to talk about is, if we talked earlier about kind of plugging we talked earlier about plug and play culture kind of, and the idea that you should just be able to pick up anything and use it, right? And many things are designed around this now. That was Tim Godwin walking by whistling. So many things are designed around that idea now. And so in certain things, expertise has not only been lost, but it's also kind of frowned upon. And in the same way that you wouldn't, if you have a medical issue, you wouldn't necessarily diagnose it and treat it yourself, hopefully. You know, talking to somebody who has professional live sound knowledge or experience is worth doing. The reality is, if you're a live sound engineer, somebody should be able to show up with any brand of pickup, Fishman, Bags, ES2, whatever. They should be able to show up with anything, and you should be able to get a workable sound out of it because you're a professional and that's your job. Now, that's not to say average Joe just plugging in, that may be more difficult for that person. And so one of the things we talked about in the ES2 episode is what is the goal of the thing? The goal of like under saddle pickups is consistency, so that you plug it in and it always sounds like the thing. The ES2 is trying to sound like the guitar.
Yep.
And so it's going to be different. And, one of the things that Rich was kind of talking about is preferences. Everybody has different preferences. So if you say to many people, or to any person, acoustic guitar, if you say acoustic guitar, we have a mental image of what is an acoustic guitar in our head. Now, for like my dad and many people, who grew up with a certain generation of music, they're hearing a D28 because that's what Bob Dylan played and all these things, or a D18. The type of music they grew up listening to, that's what they're hearing in their head. And so when you talk about people who have a preference toward one type of pickup or another, most of them, like when I was, touring, playing music, most of the people I played with were playing with Fishman undersaddle pickups. And so for most of my career, that's what undersaddle pickups were. They were Fishman undersaddle pickups, and that's all there was, really. I mean, that's all anybody used for a long time. And so getting used to anything else, or anything else that comes along and kind of challenges your mental picture, your preconceived notion of what something is or is supposed to sound like, can be hard to adjust to, or can be a challenge to adjust to. And so that's
yeah, but I think that the difference, and yeah, I mean, you're dead on, but here's the step that I'm trying to make, is that your preference, you can have preferences. You're exactly right. The problem is that if you don't know that your ear is deficient, let's say you only hear to 15,000, and you listen to something and you don't know that your ear only hears to 15,000, you're going to be susceptible to different frequencies that somebody else isn't hearing. All right. So one of the things that I've always done, once I found out that I was deficient in a certain area, when I'm setting my tone or listening to something, I have to make sure that I'm not overcompensating for what I can't hear. And the biggest thing that anybody can do, I'll tell you right now, this is going to be I want you, if you forget anything, or if you remember anything, remember this. If you set up to play a gig and you're in a coffee shop or a church, wherever it is, and you start to play, you should look at the females in the audience. And if they're wincing, then you know that your high frequency is off. Because they can hear
women
to 19,000 to 20,000. And if you're pushing that, and all of a sudden they're saying, hey, we got to get out of here. This hurts. Keep your eye on them, because that's your gauge.
Okay? Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, Rich.
So look at your crowd. They're gonna tell you if your settings are good. So the other thing is that play your acoustic guitar not plugged in. Just do the best you can to listen to it. Hear what that sounds like. When you begin to plug in, and you plug into a direct box, bypass your effects for right now. Just plug your guitar into the direct box, into the PA. Make sure that your acoustic guitar is set totally flat. In a Taylor world, it'll be where the detents are focusing at the neck. Make sure that the sound system, all the tone controls are set flat. And if there's an EQ, a global EQ, see if you can bypass that and do the best you can to recreate what you heard the guitar was doing acoustically to what you're hearing. That's your first step.
I talked about this a little last week, Rich, about
Mm-hmm.
one of the ways I was a Taylor dealer for a long time, and one of the ways I used to always show off the ES2 was to plug it in, but kill the volume on the pickup. Plug it in, set everything flat, and have the person just start playing, and then slowly reach over and turn the volume up on the guitar. Just a little bit, and then bring it back down, and turn it up a little more, and bring it back down. And what you're doing is you're teaching yourself to compare the two sounds so that you hear what you're doing in the room. And what you're doing when you do that is you're slowly raising the volume that's coming out of the speaker, and it's overtaking the sound of the guitar in the room, and you can hear how close they are.
Yeah.
Right.
Now the other thing that I would recommend is that if you use a looper, or if you have access to a looper, and it's a good looper, most of them are, they're digital, they'll be okay, is you plug it in straight, direct, no effects yet. All we're trying to do is set your overall tone. Make a loop, make about a 1 minute loop, put the guitar down, and then just play the loop, walk around the room and listen to it. Because that's going to tell you where deficiencies in the room are. It's going to tell you what it really sounds like to your crowd. Because remember, that's who's paying you to play.
Yeah.
Because if you don't do a good job and you don't sound good, you're not going to get rehired. So that's step number one.
If I may interrupt real quick, that is a very, very true statement right there. We work with a band called This Wild Life, and they're pretty much just, it's a 2-piece, sometimes 3-piece, but they switch instruments and they play sometimes it's 2 guitars, sometimes it's a bass player and a guitar player, sometimes it's a drummer and acoustic, and so they, when they do sound checks, interestingly, I don't want to get into the game of wireless guitar systems, but they use a wireless guitar system, and the guitar player, the main guitar player, Kevin, will walk out during a sound check into the middle of the floor where the most of the crowd are going to stand, and that is how he does sound check, right? Because just like Rich said, you could see, we have a venue here in San Diego, the Observatory, and there's a scoop in the floor right in front of house where it gets really muddy. The low end gets really muddy. So I do my best to stand when I'm watching a show behind front of house because the sound is better. It's just designed that way. So there are deficiencies. There are things that we can't control.
Right. Okay.
Keep going.
So the next thing, that I would probably do is let's continue this DI thing just a little bit more. Let's say that you're doing something where you're going to be using the PA, the sound system, to amplify you're not going to use an acoustic guitar amp. So it's going to be feeding through the monitors. It's going to be doing another thing, or maybe you do have a guitar amp. But you can take your DI a step further. And now I happen to use one of these. And this is a Fishman Platinum. And
acoustic DI.
It's a DI, but it also has tone control. There you go. It has tone control. It has some feedback filters, and it has multiple outputs. So why would that be important? Well, number one is that I can send an unaltered signal to the PA.
Yeah.
So if I have a guy like Gabriel running front of house, I am not concerned. He's going to make me sound good. Okay. And we're going to talk, and we're going to be doing all of our sound checks, and he's going to make sure that I sound good. But on stage, I might need to dial in something a little bit different. So I can send a different output to an amp on stage that I send to Gabe. All right. So these things are great Swiss Army knives to have. Now, they're not cheap. They might run $400. Um, but oh my God, this is amazing to use. Is something like this, and
Here's the question right here.
yeah,
Um,
that's what this is. This is
yep.
a DI that's specifically for an acoustic guitar.
So
I'm a big fan, real quick, Gabe. I am a big fan of acoustic DIs for acoustic guitars. The one that I held up right here is very basic. It's a radial AC driver. It's got a low cut. It's got a notch filter, and it's got a level, so like an output on it. Other ones, there was a question earlier in the feed, or a statement, I believe someone said that they just bought a pair LR Bags Venue DI. Those are great. They come with a tuner. That is a fantastic DI. I mix
This has
those.
the tuner as well.
I mix those at a church quite often.
So-
There's another LR Bags called a Para DI that's fantastic. Go ahead, Gabe. Sorry.
I want to talk about real quick while you have that, Jay, and while Rich has his, I want to talk a little bit about what those controls mean. So, Jay, you were talking about a low cut,
Yeah.
which will roll off certain frequencies as you adjust it, and then a notch filter. And what a notch filter does is as you adjust it, it will kill one frequency. So if you have a frequency that's ringing out and feeding back through your PA, you can take that notch filter and you slowly adjust it. And if you imagine it as just a single frequency minus, and it moves around, and you will just kill the frequency that's feeding back. And so that's what notch filters are for. They'll just remove
Hey, Gabe, on this, there is let me exit this real quick. On this, there is a button that says off. So it's that's passing through, you're killing the notch filter, right?
Right.
And then a normal and deep. What would normal and deep mean?
So what that's going to do is it's going to adjust the Q, and it's probably going to, in that it might adjust the curvature of the Q. So a normal might be a single frequency and deep might be just a wider cut.
Yeah.
It may also adjust how far it's cutting. So normal might be cutting a little and deep might be cutting a ton. I haven't ever read the manual for that particular DI, but my guess is it's adjusting the width of the Q. So normal might be cutting like maybe, I don't know, 5 frequency bands or 1 frequency band, and deep might be cutting 20. So like if you have a lot of, so we talked a little bit earlier about how rooms affect sound, and Rich was talking about moving around a room and listening to how the room goes. I was saying hi to Sergio. He's right there. It's cool
Sergio.
it's cool being at Taylor. I'm seeing people that I know. So
Real people.
I don't normally see people. I live in Amish country. So, one of the cool things is when you're in different rooms, different things happen. Jay talked about that bowl and where low frequencies can build up. So based on where you are in different rooms, frequencies can build up and cause different issues. So, you may need to cut certain frequencies in one venue and not in another. One of the things that I think is really valuable about like what Rich has there. So when he's talking about being able to send a signal out to a front of house engineer, and thank you for the compliment, that's very nice, when you've got a qualified front of house engineer. But the other thing that's a real benefit to that kind of DI is if you're regularly playing somewhere where you either, like a lot of churches have volunteers that are untrained, or
True.
you're at a coffee shop or a bar or something where there is no live sound engineer, it's just you. So one of the things you can do is you can plug that in at home and dial in a good basic tone with the EQ controls on the thing that's kind of basically where you like it. And then when you get to a place, you have a good starting point already that sounds pretty good.
Yeah.
And that's a really big asset when you are somewhere where you don't have the ability to do a bunch of sound checking, or you don't have a dedicated sound engineer who knows what they're doing. I think things like that are, that's where things like that. Jay, you mentioned the LR Bags Venue DI, which is a DI I use and love.
It's
and the reason
very
is
easy. It's very, very, very easy. I don't have one with me, but it's very easy to use. And like Gabe said, you can pretty much send a really good signal, and the front of house person can just be almost flat.
Yeah.
You know?
Somebody
And
made
I love that it has two sweet. We talked on the ES2 episode about how guitar is a mid-range instrument, and that controlling the mid-range of the instrument is what's going to
Sure,
give you the most
John.
benefit on a guitar. And the Venue DI has two sweepable mid-range
Right.
EQs. Yes, I assume the EQ on the PA is not out of whack. Yes, because I'm assuming, hopefully, that somebody has gone up to that PA and correctly set up the input channel, meaning either a qualified live sound engineer is, setting the channel correctly and setting the channel flat.
Also right, Phil.
Also right, yes. But this is a good point, and I want to address this in 1 second. It's really important to, yes, when you set up a PA, it's important to do it correctly. If there is no sound engineer, or there's someone there that you don't know, or you don't, as a volunteer that you don't trust knows what they're doing, it's really important for you to know how to set up a channel correctly and how to correctly set input gain, and just, that's where I would set your controls flat and let your starting point at least kind of do the work. Now, to Phil's point, sound is relative. What sounds good to you may not to everybody else. That's super relevant and super true. However, one of the things that we get into when we talk about differences between pickups and things like that, what guitar players are always telling you is what they're hearing.
Right.
You're not telling us what your audience is hearing.
that's the point I was trying to make.
Right.
Yeah.
When people say, I can't get the ES2 to sound right, they're saying, I can't get it to sound right to me. So having a DI like what Rich is holding there, or that Jay is holding, or like the Venue DI, where you have some control over the audio, at some places, like some larger churches or larger clubs or larger venues, you may have a monitor engineer. And so you may adjust the EQ on that and send that feed to your monitor engineer, or to your onstage acoustic guitar amp, or just to your wedge or whatever, and send, a clean feed out to your audio engineer, your live sound engineer. So, excuse me, having those options can be really valuable.
True.
So let's take the next step and say, once we've tried to work in our overall tone by not hooking up effects yet, and we did everything that we said we were going to do. Now if you have some effects, like let's say you have a digital delay and maybe you have a chorus, something like that, and you're going to put those into chain where, Gabe? Before
Modulation
the DI.
Well, no, this is interesting. So
Thank you.
Rich knew Rich knew how I was going to answer that already, because we're pedal nerds. So in electric guitars, when you're dealing with pedals, where things happen in the signal chain is very important. One of the cool things, does your Fishman have an effects loop, Rich?
Yes.
Your Fishman DI? Okay, this is one of the things I like about the Venue DI, is it has an effects loop. An effects loop takes, and maybe you can explain this a little more eloquently than me, Rich, but it takes the signal out through the pedals and back in. So it allows you to EQ the guitar independently of the effects, basically. Right. So if you put the effects before everything else, one of the things I talk about a lot are gain stages too, because a lot of pedals have a level, right? So every time you're adjusting a gain or a level, you're adding a gain stage and making the pickup on the guitar more sensitive, which is problematic. So when you start layering in effects, one of the things that happens when you stack things in front is when you get to the EQ stage. So if you have a reverb and a delay and all those things, when you're stacking them in front of your DI, you're EQing all of those things. Now, when you have a DI like Rich does, or the Venue DI that I have that has an effects loop, you actually EQ independent of those signals. So you can EQ the thing and then send the signal through. Highly.
So let's not confuse anybody. So I'm going to take.
Was that Siri?
That was Siri on my watch.
So
Siri was like, Gabe, "Wrap it up. You guys are nerds."
Siri was like, Gabe, "I don't understand."
So Gabe, for these people that are listening, let's say that they just have a digital delay.
Mm-hmm.
All they have is a digital delay. Does it go guitar to DI to digital delay? No. It
No.
goes guitar to digital delay to DI. Okay. Let's say they also have a chorus, and they're just using a regular passive DI. We don't have one of these. We just got this.
My first piece of advice would be get one of those. Stop buying other pedals and
Okay.
get one of
So
those.
they don't have one. So guitar to chorus to delay
Right.
to DI. Right? Are you okay with that?
It typically, like where it depends on what your goal is the short answer.
Well,
but
Hey, we're saying that again?
No, but
I'm
see,
seeing a
here's the
trend,
issue.
Mike.
But the issue is, I don't mean to control here, but here is where your low impedance is.
right,
So everything has to go in the front.
right.
This is always going to be last in the chain.
Yeah. The
Yeah.
other way in which that you could utilize that, let's say you don't have an effects loop with Rich, that does have a through channel. And so you could, if you have a PA where you have an extra channel, you could take the through channel. You could get a second one of those cheap DIs basically. And you could take the
Science.
through channel and go to your effects and send them through a second DI basically, or to an acoustic guitar amp, and then send that to the PA. And then you
Right.
give the front of house the option. Front of house, by the way, is a term for your sound engineers. If I ever say that,
I
that's
guess
all
what
I'm
I'm-
talking about.
I-
You're giving
I
them
guess
the
what I'm-
option to blend.
I guess what I'm trying to do here is I'm trying the KISS method here of keeping it simple,
Yeah.
because where some of us
The
are
best
like,
way
yeah,
to keep it simple is don't layer a bunch of effects on your guitar. Start really simple. Use simple controls, use small EQ moves. A lot of times people will go out and they'll try to do too many things at once. So they'll go, oh, this doesn't sound the way I want it to.
So what
and
he's
they'll throw
saying
a
is
ton of stuff at it.
you're gonna do a low cut. Don't do this. Don't
Yeah.
do this. Right?
Yeah.
It's
Same
the
thing
same
on
with the ES2. It's the same with any knobs. You kind of gotta. It takes time sometimes to just go in there and dial it in.
One at a time. Just one notch at a time. Make small adjustments.
Except
just
if you're
know-
using the fart pedal.
Yeah. Then just go all in.
Just go all in
I just
on the fart
know
pedal.
that there's people out there that are listening that are going to be using delays and choruses and maybe a reverb and a looper. They're out there. And and for some reason they're not going to buy a $400 one of these or a $300 bags or a $200 bags. They're going to be using this.
Mhm.
So the easiest thing to do is just make sure that this guy is last, and make sure that you set your overall tone before you plug the effects in.
And
So-
that's a really good note. Set the tone of the guitar and the input gain of the guitar before you plug the effects in. And the reason to do that is if something weird happens, you start getting some kind of giant squelch or you have weird frequencies building up, then you know it's not happening from the clean tone of the guitar, and you can go in and adjust the effects. The other thing you could do, Rich, is buy a basic, again, in that signal chain, you could buy a basic EQ pedal to go before those effects if you needed to dial in a little more tone pre-effects.
Ken has a really good point, and I want to bring this up, and I'm going to kind of pull this back so that we don't have another 4.5 hour show. But
That's a great point.
we use what
That's a
we can
great point.
afford, and that is true, right? That is true. We use what we can afford. So hopefully, Philip, there are no stupid questions. There are good ones and great ones. Think about what I just said. There are only
Mhm.
good ones and great ones. Some are just good. Some are great. You're fine,
Yeah.
man. We appreciate you coming out here. But anyway, you see what I'm saying is we use what we can afford, or we use what we have access to sometimes,
Sure.
right? And sometimes you're going to a venue or you're going to a coffee shop, and quite frankly, they got, something.
A janky little piece
They-
together.
they got
PVPA
this
from the
or-
80s or
Right. We don't all walk around like Jay does with this orange 2-channel pre, right?
Right.
Like we don't
You know,
walk
I think before we we sign off, Jay, there's one more thing that we need to talk about, and that is the player that has multiple acoustic guitars.
Yeah.
And
Real
they only
quick.
have one channel. And,
Yeah.
you know, the church or the coffee house is only going to give them one channel. We like now in the back of me, I've got a mahogany GA, I've got a maple grand concert, and then I
Yeah.
have my American Dream. These things are all going to be, you know, slightly different, and you can't just take the time to do all that. And if you only get one channel, I would advise maybe, and Gabe, jump in here if you think I'm incorrect, but you can get one of these little tiny mixers.
Oh yeah. It's also a
And you can
good
plug
play.
your guitars into these multiple channels, set them the way you want them, and then you have one output that goes into your direct box, and then you can do it. And then you can change your guitars quickly and go
That
that
is
route.
what we call a hack.
Yeah, that's a total hack.
That is a total good guitar hack right there. Get a little mixer. They don't cost a ton. That's great.
One of the things I'll talk about when you're using something like that is to remember I talked about gain staging a little bit ago. And so when you plug a guitar into that, you have a gain on the channel, right? And then you have a volume fader that goes to the master out, and then you have a fader there. So on all of those though, and so those are gain stages, and they're increasing the sensitivity of the pickup. They're increasing what you put out to that main PA. There are often like auxiliary sends on there that will bypass the master fader, and that might be a better choice sometimes, but it just depends. The other thing you can do, let's say you have like Rich's Fishman or a Venue DI or even a Para DI. One of the things you can do is set some basic controls based around like common mid-range frequency issues. So like if you know based on the way you play, you tend to have a harder attack and you use a thinner pick. So you're probably going to want to do some cutting in kind of the high mids, right? Kind of the 1K to 4K range. You might want to just pull that down a little bit, because you're just going to do that to all your guitars, right? I'll answer this in a second too. So and then you might want to just roll off a little low end, anything below like 80 hertz. You might want to just kind of roll that off. And then from there, when you switch guitars, you got to remember you also have EQ controls on your physical guitar, and they are boost and cut controls. And in fact, real quick, I want to show real quick the little pickup control video.
Oh yeah.
This is helpful. So on our ES2, it's really important to understand that we have 3 different controls. The closest to your body when you're holding a guitar is going to be bass, then treble, and then volume. So let's say Rich has you just said a minute ago that you have a mahogany guitar and you have a maple guitar. Your maple is probably spruce top, right? So it's probably going to have more output than your mahogany guitar. It's going to be louder. So you might need to turn the volume on your mahogany guitar up a little bit to match the volume on your maple guitar. And
That's right.
You might need to roll the top end of your maple guitar, that treble control. You might need to pull that down a little bit to even out. So you do have some controls on the guitars. So you can set some general controls on your EQ pedal or at the soundboard, and then dial in a little more with the guitars.
Yeah, and a good thing to learn is to learn those controls. And it's hard to just say plug into a PA and learn the PA. But if it's a PA that you're repeatedly playing at, like a church, right?
Church
and you
or a coffee shop, you
understand
play
how
it
the
all the
room,
time.
how the room sounds. It's really nice to understand how that pickup. Gabe, will you throw that back up real quick? And then, no, the clip.
Oh, the controls?
Yeah.
Yes.
There we go. If you're looking at this again, so remember I played that clip at the beginning of the show of Lizzie McAlpine on Fallon. So you took that bass and I just cut it just the tiniest bit past the notch towards my body, her body.
That's an active cut. So that's
an active cut. So that's a
little
tiny
move
bit
is significant.
Was perfect. I cut the treble just a little bit, and then the volume was If pointing straight out, just point it up was about 9:30. That's what we'll say. It was about halfway between 9 and 10 p.m.
So
If you're
we talked about Lizzie having a really delicate touch. She's a really gentle player. She's using her fingers. She's not using a pick. She's not using a little pressure. So what you're doing is you're boosting the volume on that active preamp to give more signal to front of house. And that is a good good example of using the pickup on the guitar to give them the best signal possible, the best starting point possible.
we got a ton of questions over here. This has been an awesome. This has been an awesome episode. I want to throw a few questions. We're not going to get to every question. We got to wrap the show up in a little bit. We got some people who got to travel. We understand we got some people on the East Coast. So I'm going to throw some of these questions up here, and we will talk about.
While you're looking for a question, Jay, I just want to bring up something really quick. Something that I've heard over the years about ES2 and ES1 for that matter. When we talk about, there you go.
That's exactly right.
We love you, TC. You rule.
When we talk about dialing in, your sound and all that, and we say, well, this DI box will help. And I'll have a lot of people say, well, I don't want a system that I need to add things onto in order to use it. Well, let me just say this. LR Bags didn't make it for Taylor.
Right.
You can use these on any system. This is not a cause and effect. It's something that many people use on many different types of pickup systems to get a sound that works for them. So I just want to make
Fishman,
sure
the Fishman pickup or DI that Rich keeps showing it's the same thing. Like they make these things for all guitars, right? There's been a couple of amp questions in here. We're going to do an acoustic amp episode sooner than later. So I'm going to hold all those because it's hard to suggest, really. There's so many different options out there. And at the end of the day, it's all subjective. At the end of the day, it's, what plays into it, budget.
The other quick thing to remember, just really quick, is that on most acoustic guitar amps, there's a built-in direct box and a built-in DI out.
Yeah.
So just so whether it's a Fishman, a Boss, anything, they have that direct out on them. So you set that thing up so you can hear it. Set it the way you want to hear it. If your hearing sucks, set it to way your hearing sucks. So you like the tone, you'll play better. But it's got a direct out, and then Gabriel's going to fix it in the front of house.
Gabriel's going to fix it in post.
I'm going to come and fix all of your sound.
Yes, all of the
There's a couple of questions. I already said it. Jeremy had one. Any suggestions for an upgrade after using Venue for 10 years? I said, keep it. It's what you know, and it's an amazing acoustic DI. Yeah. Don't change. You don't need to.
If you want some add-on suggestions for that, though, they make in that Align series, there is a one that's a little bit of a compressor. Sometimes a little bit of just a touch of compression can really help even out your sound. If you're like me and you're a bit of a sloppy player, sometimes what a compressor will do is kind of even out the peaks of what you're doing. Rich has one built in. That's nice.
Yeah.
So a little bit of compression can go a long way and be a big help, especially if you're a little bit. Don't use a ton because it will sound terrible. But a little bit can be a big help, especially if you're playing somewhere that has, like we keep mentioning churches, but like bars or coffee shops, places like that often have these very basic PA in a box systems or something like that. And most of them don't have compression built in, although all the Yamahas do and some other brands now. But a little bit goes a long way with those, and it can really help even out your sound. So something like that. They also make a saturation pedal, which is just some harmonic saturation. I love a little bit of saturation on acoustic guitars. I feel like it's a big help. A little bit of reverb goes a long way too in that effects loop.
This is pretty interesting question, actually. Phil with another question bomb. But I still don't understand why the wood produces one tone, but you change it and roll off tones. Doesn't that defeat the purpose of that tone, like mahogany?
No. So here's the deal with that is, Gabe, take it. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
No, you're fine. So when we're talking about like rolling off something, what we're trying to do, So, be it in live sound or in mixing recordings, I typically with a cue will use subtractive EQ first. And what I'm trying to do is get rid of frequencies that um, rub up against other things in the mix or are problematic in the room. So Jay was talking about a venue earlier that had kind of a problematic, like low mid range or low range. So what I'm going to do is go in and try to scoop out some of those frequencies, not to drastically change the sound of the guitar, but just to reduce what kind, the amount of problem they might create in the room. So rooms have a sound. So when you set up and you play an acoustic guitar in a room and it's got a bunch of 100 hertz low end, and you're in a square box room that's really reflective and has a tile floor or a concrete floor, you might get a bunch of standing low end and you have a very muddy mix. So you may need to reduce that a little bit or pull
Yeah,
that down.
and you're not going to change a mahogany to sound like a maple, and you're not going to
Right.
change a maple to sound like a rosewood. What you're trying to do is get the tone pleasing to the audience. And Phil, one of the things, and I think you had a comment a few minutes ago too, that said, like the sound of something, I like this better than that or whatever. And earlier in the show, I discussed the fact that a lot of us are hearing deficient. I mean, I'm 68, 67 years old, and I'm
You don't
sorry,
look a
I
day
know
over
that
63.
Yeah, you don't look a
know it.
day over 64.
but I know that I don't hear above 15,000 hertz. So what I think sounds right
What?
doesn't really sound right. And I can't stress it enough. I have these conversations on a daily basis. Just because you hear something doesn't mean the 99 other people in the room hear the way you do. And it's really hard. People hate me for saying that, but it's my God, it's the truth. So
Someone earlier mentioned something that brought me back to a message I received on Facebook from somebody who had listened to the podcast, and it was about hearing aids. They were talking about somebody had messaged me and had watched the podcast, and they said, "Hey, I'm having this issue, and I have these frequencies that are really strong, and could this be because of my hearing aids?" And I went, "Well, yeah, because hearing aids are designed to amplify frequencies in which you're deficient, and most, a lot of times people are deficient in when you get hearing aids, you're amplifying the mid range where human speaking voices are, so it's going to make mid range instruments sound stronger." And he kind of went, "Oh, that makes a lot of sense." And it turned out his hearing aids, I don't remember what they were, but they had like a music setting that evened things out and made them more hi-fi, and it made a huge difference for him. But he was cutting all the mid-range out of his guitar, and it was the hearing aids that were amplifying those frequencies so he could hear them better as though they were speaking voices. So
Interesting.
things like that, you got to remember, things like that make a huge difference, and your ears may naturally be doing that anyway.
Does an external preamp perform the same job as a direct injection box?
No. I'm going to say no.
I mean, a preamp's job is to amplify the signal. Sometimes they will have a lot of them. So I'm trying to think of some common ones, like DTAR was one that I saw a lot a while back. Some of those would actually have kind of a D-type or a DI box built in where they would send a balance signal out of them. But
yeah,
not specifically, no. A preamp is about levels. It's about gain. So they're not always balanced output. Sometimes they are. If it's balanced, like you can read the literature on it, and if you want to mention a specific one, maybe we can give you a better sound or a better answer here, but not always.
yeah, I get it. Okay. I think actually we've been answering these questions as we go. There was one question this when the knob is that okay, I think you're meaning the controls. The knob is at detent. So on the bass and treble, that is at unity or 0. Some people like to call it that. And at the volume, when the volume is at detent, it's at 5. So it's 0 to 10. So if you roll it all the way off, it's nothing. And you roll it all the way up, it's 11. I mean 10. We're guitar players. We can have that joke all the time. We're going to keep it forever.
Okay, so let's just. I'm going to take that a step further.
Oh no! Oh goodness
When the
gracious.
knob is at detent, it's flat. It's not at 5. It's flat. Remember, we're talking about an active preamp. So that means it's flat. If you take bass up or bass down, Gabe, help me here. I think it's 6 dB. I think it's 6 dB.
Right. And 6 dBs is roughly half, just for those who don't understand how dBs work. So that's true of the EQ section. The volume section is 0 to 10. So, but the detents, I would, the detent on the EQ section, the bass and treble controls, I would consider that 0, and you have all the way down to -6 or up to +6.
-6 or +6.
Right.
And
volume
keep in mind
is 0 to 10. So
right.
straight up, and if all 3 knobs are straight up, your volume is at 5. The other 2 are actually at 0.
At 0. Okay. So when you since this
right, John,
EQ
numbers not
section,
clock position.
Yeah, numbers not clock position, right?
Since this ES2 is active, when you're moving these things around, it builds an EQ curve. You're not notching anything. You're building a curve.
Right.
Correct.
So, surgical EQ is bad, but musical EQ that builds a curve is good. And that's
true.
what we're doing. You'll also notice that there's
You
no
are correct,
mid-range.
Chris.
There's no mid-range control because we don't want you screwing with the mid-range.
Because the guitar is a mid-range instrument.
Right.
So you build this curve, whether you're doing this or whether you're doing that.
Right. Right. So again, to simplify it,
I thought I just
detent.
did.
Right. I think I think you got to back up a little bit, like for people like my mother who had zero idea what the ES2 even was, expression system 2, right? And so I had to kind of walk her through some of these things and frequencies and all that kind of stuff. So bass, center detent, pointing straight down. We'll say down towards the floor. Some people could call it 6 o'clock. All right. Down, bass is 0, plus minus. Treble is 0, plus minus. And then right in the middle. So if you roll the volume all the way off, it's off.
Okay.
It's at 0, and then roll it up.
This is what we call a shelf.
Yeah, there we go, nerds.
So high on a mixing console, on the soundboard, a PA, the high knob and the low knob control a shelf. And the shelf, as you turn it up, the shelf not only increases in how much it's going up, but the steepness of it, the Q, as we call it, how steep it is, changes. Same thing when it goes down. So if you think about, sorry, Jay, I'm using all your Post-it notes right now, but this is what I have. So let's say you want this would be what I would call a gentle shelf versus a strong shelf. So a little bit of turning it up versus a lot of turning it up is going to change how the shelf looks. So the more you turn it up, you're going to get not only is it going to be more of the signal, but it's going to be a more drastic amount. And that's how shelf controls work. And that's what those are. They're shelves.
Interesting. That's great. All right. We could dive in. We could keep going for another 5.5 hours, but let's spare people. I think we know that this is a big topic. Big topic. I think, Sharpie, no, you should think of a question and write it in here and I'll answer it. I like this idea, Sharpie. You can't get away from
Sharpie's
us.
question would be
a
great.
Sharpie's question from Sharpie in the feed is tight.
While we wait on that, Jay, this is an important question that needs answering.
Send me an email. You're a Primetime fan. We'll work it out. That is a fantastic question. Anyway, we can work on a tour. That'd be great. So, I don't even know where I was because you just blew me out right there, Gabe.
Sorry,
2 minutes of sports, right?
I lost all train of thought here.
2 minutes
anyway,
of sports.
So we could go on and on and on and on and on about this subject. It's never perfect, and it's a lot of hard work. There's no magic bullet, and it takes time.
Actually, there is a magic bullet.
What is that?
a direct box. Just use a direct
wanna-
box.
Hold on real quick. Hold on. I'm going to do a Bob Taylor quote real quick. Okay. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. That's what we're summing this up with. Sometimes your guitar's not going to sound great. And
Sometimes you're not going to play well.
Sometimes you're not going to play well. Sometimes
It's still worth playing, right?
it's still worth playing.
It's
It
still
is
worth trying to
absolutely
get
still
better.
worth playing. It's sometimes we're going to have, bum primetime shows. Sometimes we're going to talk too much at the beginning. We're always going to talk too much at the beginning. Just warning you guys. Sometimes we're going to do the things, and patience is with music. I often said this when I came from the music industry on the recording side. A lot of you know that. And I used to tell artists, time and patience are your ally. And it sucks sometimes. We don't want to be patient. We just want it to work, right? Sometimes you buy a lemon and you drive it off the lot and it breaks down. It just happens. Not Rich, though. He's got a purple car and it's pretty tight. But
No, I don't have that anymore.
or you don't have it anymore. Okay, you don't have it anymore. But anyway, so you get my point here. Anything worth doing is worth doing poorly. It takes hard work to get great at things. And that's just kind of sums up this whole couple episodes.
You didn't learn to play your instrument in a day.
Well, yeah, I
want to
did.
learn.
I'm just kidding.
If you want to, well, you play bass, so you could. Kidding for all the bass players out there. No, if you want to learn how to really dial in live sound,
I got a Sharpie's question for Rich.
so good. So if you want to really learn how to like dial in live sound and get good at it, then it's going to take some time to do. It's not a plug and play done thing, or there's not one setting that works for everything. The other thing I do want to say is if you have more questions or need advice about like specific things, or, and still playing the drummer, always.
Yeah, we agree.
100% of the time.
100% of the time, it works every time.
If you have more questions and you want to go deeper on things, feel free to pop over to the Taylor Guitars Owners Group on Facebook. It's just called Taylor Guitars Owners Group. You'll find myself in there very often, Rich in there too, and we'll try to help you out and answer your questions.
And also understand that when people type words, you can't understand or feel the emotion of their opinions. So
Yeah, a lot of times I'll respond with a video to things too, because sometimes it's just easier to talk.
Yeah, right. So hang out over there. Hang out with us on Tuesday nights. I have a Sharpie question for Rich, and then we're going to do 2 minutes of sports, and then we are going to do lots of ES2 haters on Facebook. That is true. We converted some people last week, but a lot of it is because they just don't know, and it takes a little bit of work. Okay, Sharpie's question for Rich. Okay, my question. I'm going to read the whole text. Ask Rich, what three is a lot? He'll talk for 45 minutes, Sharpie. Okay. What 3 albums would you use to describe you?
Where does he come up with this stuff?
This is very deep.
This is deep, man. I can tell you what mine is.
Okay.
I can answer this.
You can answer that.
Should we all pick one that we think describes Rich?
Oh my God! Don't let Venezia answer. Goodbye, Yellow Brick Road.
Solid choice. Great record.
Give me back my bullets.
Okay.
By the way, rest in peace, Gary Rosington. We lost Gary Rosington this week too.
Yeah, we did. R.I.P.
Go ahead, Venezia. What do you got for me?
I was going to say Wings Across America for some reason. I don't know why. I just Wings Across America. Or,
I would have said Band on the Run.
Band on the Run. That's a good one.
There we go.
Well,
All
I was
Wings.
thinking Abbey Road.
Well, Abbey Road's fantastic too.
So, Sharpie,
Yes.
I missed you.
I would have said Revolver.
Well, I said give me back my bullets. So hey,
There you go. Okay.
kind of goes with a revolver.
Oh, that's a good one. Do you have one, Mike? What is yours? Just
I
Mine?
said
one.
Wings Across America.
well, no, for Rich.
For Mike. What is yours, Mike?
Mine, I guess, could be summed up, and nobody on this panel or probably in the chat has listened to this, but the very first Mr. Bungle album, that sums me up.
Okay, I got you. I feel you on that one. Yeah. Gabe, what would yours be? He's looking up.
By the way, if anybody goes and listens to the first Mr. Bungle album now, I'm sorry.
No, you're not.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm happy for me. Don't get me wrong.
What would sum me up? I don't know. Swell Season, Strict Joy, maybe? Historical Conquest of Josh Ritter? Something like that.
Interesting. Not Doggyland, Kids Hits Volume 1. That's what I would have said.
Tempting.
All right. Thanks,
Sheets
Sharp.
the
That was a
school bus
great
driver?
question. I think we should forego 2 minutes of sports and go right to okay, never mind. 2 minutes of sports. Hey, Rich, I really back your Phillies this year. I think your Phillies are going to do an outstanding job. That's
Yeah,
one thing
think-
I got to say.
I
think
you're
that
right.
you
I
guys
hope they
did
do
a
better
good-
than my Eagles did.
I think you're going to do a good job in the offseason. Hey, you know what? They deserve a participation trophy. They made it to the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
That's hard to do. Just throwing that out there.
Only 2 teams a year do that.
Yeah,
Really?
only 2 teams, and they
And
just
one of
didn't-
them lost.
and one of them lost the
Yeah.
game of the bowl of Super.
The
Okay.
game of the bowl.
All right, so that's 2 minutes of sports. Oh my! At this point, there you go. Carolina
We're full
Hurricanes.
service here at Primetime.
We are. We got 2 minutes of sports. We actually have a useless clip that we usually play, but I decided not to play it. All right, hold on, dude. Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Here's a trivia question before we go to Evan's question. Who is the drummer of Slipknot?
I know.
Well, he's deceased.
no.
was
No,
Joey.
no, the current drummer of Slipknot,
Current drummer.
and who is his dad?
Yes.
Who is the current drummer of Slipknot's father?
That is the question to ask.
It's not Rich.
It's not
it is
Rich.
not Rich, though they're probably about the same age.
Do you know Rich? You don't know?
Well, these guys are from my hometown. I mean, one of the guys used to live right down the street from me, and Mick and Jim and I are. But they bought all of their gear for their first album from my music store.
Hey, Weinberg. Yes, Jay
Close.
Weinberg, and
Jay
his
Weinberg.
father's name is Max. If you know who Max Weinberg is, E Street Band.
Currently
Yes.
touring with Bruce Springsteen.
Currently touring with Bruce
Yes.
Springsteen. And yes, Jay Weinberg is used to come to some of the shows of the bands that were on my label, the label that I ran. And so yeah, it's really interesting how that world works. All right. 10 seconds of sports. That's right. I changed it tonight. All right. We do have an Evans question.
Yes.
This is a great question. You guys know the rules here. You know how this works. Send us an email at primetime@taylorguitars.com. The first person to answer this question correctly is the winner. Hey, we
Jay?
should.
Jake,
Yeah?
really quick question. Can Paul Tobias answer tonight?
No,
Can I?
I tried.
answer?
I tried, Paul. I tried.
you cannot answer the question, Gabe. That is the rule.
Am I
Every
allowed to?
time.
All right, here we go. Ready? I got this. I got to get over this banners section.
I've
You
got
could
if
do it,
want.
Gabe, but I got
Yeah.
it. I got it. I'm right
Okay.
here. It's fine. Ready?
I'm
And the
monitoring
question:
answers.
can I get a drum roll? Blame the drummer if it's out of.
Somebody answered already.
All right, here we go.
It's the wrong one, but they answered.
On what series was the ES2 introduced?
That's interesting.
I'm watching. I'm
I
watching.
know exactly what it is.
Me too. Nerd, 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 nerd.
Look at you,
Oh,
Stan.
That's actually not true.
You sure?
Positive.
Yeah, it is.
Yeah, it
No, it's
is.
not.
Yeah, it is.
Oh,
ES2.
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 Oh wait,
It was
Oh,
not.
Mike might
On
be
that.
correct. here.
What? What?
It was
Really?
introduced
The
on a
ES.
limited. Well, I'm not going to say what it is. Let's see if somebody gets it right. I'm not going.
I said
say what it is.
series. What series? Not what
Yeah,
guitar.
that's- Yeah, still.
100%
That's a messed
800
up
series.
question. Incorrect.
Ooh,
Well, now we got some beef here.
yeah.
How can that be false? I mean, we've read it.
Somebody has it right.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, come on with your LTDs.
Call
was
it
a
out.
It was a 500 series limited, and that was the first guitar that came with the ES2 system.
That's wild.
And I believe it was 2013, end of 2013, if I remember.
But I said series, so technically speaking, the first series.
If you want to give
Full
it
series.
to somebody that said 800, you can do that. But I would say 500 because it was a 500 series limited.
This is a controversial
Fight. We should
trivia
fight.
question.
That's interesting. Okay, Evan, you can answer. Hey, he made the question.
Yeah,
Interesting.
the 500 series does.
From all my research, sounds like I need to give 2 awards. Yeah, you guys have to have an internal hug your haters section right now.
All right. Well, I don't know how to wrap this segment now, Jay.
Maybe the
So-
question is, who has the largest Taylor guitar dealership in Downers Grove, Illinois?
There we go.
Oh,
who has the largest?
I know.
Who has the largest Taylor guitar dealership?
I got this one.
You can't answer.
Oh.
In Downers Grove.
Can Paul
Illinois.
Tobias answer this one?
Can Paul Tobias answer this question?
I could not find it in the 2013 magazines, and it would have been in there. So we're gonna have to clarify this.
It wouldn't have been if it's a limited.
Well, it could have been. Oh boy, what are we gonna do?
Wow.
We need to end
Tough
this.
room. Tough room, I'll tell you. It's a
I
tough
don't
room,
need
you
any
know?
more T-shirts. I'm
there's
good.
a 2014 514 CE limited that had ES2.
That's the one.
It's Tasmanian Blackwood.
All right, we're gonna clarify this, and we're gonna bring it back next episode. Cool.
Yeah.
I think we're gonna end on that note.
Wow. Yeah.
You know what?
What a weird end.
Yeah, that was a weird ending right there. We dropping like flies over here. There's still
Phil has
120
it
some
right.
people.
Phil has it right. It was a Taylor series guitar. He has that. He has that right. He is not incorrect.
All right. You know what? We'll give a prize around a Stan step 3. Shoot me an email. We'll get you a gift, and we'll clarify this question because half of us believe it's this thing and half of us believe it's the other.
In fact, the more I think about it, the more positive I am.
Oh boy. All right, you're going to need to bring literature next time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for a wonderful show. Thank you for hanging out with us on Tuesdays. I understand it's late sometimes. I understand we talk too much. It's totally fine. Gabe, thanks for jumping on. It's been fantastic. Mike, it's always good to see you. Rich, all the way from Ohio.
Iowa. You dog.
Are you in Des Moines?
He's in Des Moines.
There's Moinies.
Oh, goodness. I love saying that one to you, Rich. It's so good. All the way from Des Moines. Thank you so much. It's been great. I hope you guys learned something. Share this episode with your friends. We love you. We will not be having a show next week. Mike is traveling. Lindsay is traveling. And I'm hanging out with my mom in San Diego, California.
I think
Oh,
we should do a
Nancy.
show with me or mom and you.
We could just do a show with the 3 of us. That would be wild. My mom could air all the laundry, dirty and clean.
Well, that would tide us up, wouldn't it?
Tied us
Wow.
up. Get it? All right, guys. We'll see you next week. We don't
See you,
have an
nerds.
We don't have an outro. I could play an old outro. Nah, we're gonna hang it up.
It's
We'll
like
see
a
you next
random-
time, guys.
Just a random guest.
See you next time. 2 weeks.